why is it that we even feel the need to get intoxicated? A question that I never thought we needed to ask until recently. Today I got to sit down and talk to Edward Slingerland, author of the book Drunk: How We Sipped, Danced, and Stumbled Our Way into Civilization. We get to talk about why alcohol is possibly more than just a cultural indulgence. Together we discover why drinking helps us bypass the brain's control centers, how it has fueled creativity across civilizations, and so much more, including the dangers that distilled liquor pose and the rise of cannabis. Expect to learn how alcohol unlocks creativity and connection in ways science is only starting to understand, why prohibition may have been doomed from the beginning, and the dark evolutionary twists that make liquor both indispensable, dangerous, and, dare I say, delicious. Thank you for listening to Serves You Right. Without any further ado, here's Edward Slingerland. So yeah, thanks for taking a moment and joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I started reading Trying Not to Try too. So I know we were talking about drunk, but hey, I am really enjoying it. It's wu-wei.
Yeah.
You've got a couple of concepts that are I didn't even realize I was missing these ideas from my vocabulary, and now this is it's right there, and I see it the more I'm going around.
Yeah. No, that's like I say in the book.
Yeah.
My people I know all start using wu-wei because it's clearly filling a semantic space that we needed to have filled.
Yeah.
So it helps you, and it does, having a word for it helps you notice it.
Yeah. And I think you said it was like Schadenfreude. No one needs to have that concept explained, but once you hear it, you're like, oh yes, I've got it.
Yeah. And then you notice it more, right? Yeah.
Everywhere. Yeah. How does someone who is versed in Eastern philosophy end up writing a book about alcohol? That's where I thought I might begin.
Yeah, my colleagues wonder that too.
Mm-hmm.
It actually there's a direct line between the themes I'm looking at drunk in my previous research. So one is this my academic work in Chinese philosophy, especially my early work, focused on this concept of wu-wei, or effortless action. This idea of you want to get into the state where you're spontaneous, everything's coming naturally, you're not thinking about what you're doing, you're just relaxed, and when you can get into that state, they think you have this kind of charisma and everything works out well and you're successful. But the problem is, as the title of the trade book I wrote about this topic, the paradox is, how do you try not to try? So this book, Trying Not to Try, there's this paradox involved in consciously trying to relax. If I tell you to relax, the part of your brain I'm activating is actually the part we're trying to shut down. So it's like if I say, don't think of a white bear, you've now thought of a white bear. I've activated the concept
Instantaneously.
So there's a direct, so there's actually a direct paradox in trying to relax. And the early Chinese philosophers came up with the various types of tricks to kind of get around it. So do this ritual, do ritual things, and eventually you'll forget about what you're doing, and it'll be natural. Meditate. They seem to be using meditation practices. But at one point, there's a passage in one of these Taoist texts where they compare a drunken person to someone who's in the state of wu-wei.
Mm.
And it's clearly meant in that passage as an analogy. But that made me think, it's actually kind of close. And it made me start thinking that maybe alcohol is a cultural technology we've developed to get around the paradox of trying not to try. So you're on a first date and you're about to go out and I'm your roommate, and I say, be relaxed, don't try too hard. That's not going to help.
Yes.
But if you go to the date and you start by having a glass of wine, that alcohol is going into your brain and doing what we want to get you into a state of spontaneity. It's down regulating your prefrontal cortex, your cognitive control centers. It's boosting these kind of relaxation and feel good chemicals in your body. So it's a kind of chemical trick that helps you get around the paradox of how do you try not to try. It's a tool for getting us into this state of spontaneity or relaxation. So that's a direct connection. And then the other connections from another line of my research, which is I think of it as kind of looking at mysteries that are hiding in plain sight.
Yes.
So things that everyone does, we've been doing them forever. You show up in a new place and people are doing it, and you're like, yeah, of course, people. You don't even think about it. It's just, of course, people do it. Religion's one of those things, right? Everywhere you go, you see people worshiping invisible beings and sacrificing stuff to them and building huge monuments that have no use except to glorify these beings. And no one's ever, I have a PhD in religious studies, so I study this stuff professionally, but we tend to talk about the variety of these practices and beliefs and not necessarily talk about like, well, why do people do this in the first place?
Mm.
Because it's puzzling, right? So I'm interested in costly behavior that seems to have no practical purpose.
Yeah.
And religion is the first of those things I was interested in. And what my people have argued this in the past, but my colleagues and I developed it into a kind of more rigorous, empirically validated model of just the functions of religion. So why these things actually have social functions, individual level functions that help them survive. And I started to think that maybe chemical intoxicants in general, but alcohol in particular, is one of these things.
Mm.
It's one of these costly things that is surprising we do it, but probably it's because it has these functions that are paying for it.
Mm.
So what are those functions? And that's basically what drunk is about, is trying to explore, well, given how costly alcohol is physiologically, socially, economically, um, why is it that we've been doing it forever?
Yeah. No, and as you're talking about that, I was kind of thinking on the face of it, I always like to imagine aliens coming down and seeing us as a third perspective. And you say,
Yeah,
you look at these beings that are in love with being rational and productive, and that is true 80% of the time. They're doing a great job. They have organization and order, except for Friday, Saturday. And on those days, they like to
yeah,
go out and they like to down regulate these parts of the brain, make mistakes, use a substance that makes them feel horrible the next day and is highly addictive. You're like, okay,
yeah,
there is a paradox here. In the same way as like, it's a society that is, convinced of law and order and proof and evidence, and they're in love with the scientific method. But about 50 to 60% of them every Sunday go and worship a being that they can't see. And yeah, it's
yeah,
like, okay,
yeah.
oh, sure. uh,
Yeah, so
yeah.
that's the when you adopt an evolutionary perspective and look at human behavior, it gives you that alien perspective. So kind of from the outside,
Hmm.
what doesn't make sense? And both intoxicant use and religion don't make sense
Yeah.
unless you start to dig into what the possible functions are.
Mhm. And as you dig in, I wanted to pull up a quote that I found here. It was surprising to me. Yeah. So we forget how ubiquitous it is, but you put in the book, alcohol is by far the most widely and abundantly consumed psychoactive agent in the world. Current estimates place the number of active consumers at over 2.4 billion people, and that's
Mhm.
just alcohol. And you
Yeah.
find all these other substances, everything from marijuana. It was like kava, I believe it was called, for some of the
Hmm.
like
Yep.
island
In the
societies. And
Pacific. Yeah. Yeah.
um yeah, everyone finds some way to downregulate this at some point. It
Hmm.
seems to be not a bug but a feature of who we are. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Especially, the Kava case is interesting because it's probably the case that my colleague Joe Henrich has a theory that they don't use alcohol in this part of Oceania because the reef fish there have a poison ciguatera that comes from this algae, toxic algae,
hmm.
and alcohol and ciguatera interact in a really bad way. So he thinks it's kind of a cultural adaptation that they don't use alcohol. because of this danger from ciguatera. But it's interesting. They don't have alcohol, so they invent this kind of completely weird. They chew this tuber and spit it into a bowl and let it ferment, and that's what they use because you need an intoxicant.
You need
So,
something.
like in
Yeah.
places where they don't have alcohol, they go to elaborate extents to figure out, okay, what else in our environment can get us messed up.
Hmm.
So it really suggests there's this ecological niche that needs to get filled. And if alcohol is not there to fill it, people find something else.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, yeah, you have a lot of things. People licking toads. There's, people are
Yeah,
always gonna find a
licking
way.
toads.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
no, and what I do like too, and I think that we should touch on the way you approach alcohol use too. You're addressing a couple of the common theories of why alcohol may have hung around and may still be around, like the hangover theories. And I like that you slowly kind of disentangle those and say, I don't think that these really have a lot of weight. It seems like it's necessary. Do you mind touching on those a little bit and kind of explaining some of the yeah.
Yeah. So the standard scientific story about why we consume, let's just talk about alcohol,
Hmm.
is the hijack. They're all evolutionary mistake stories. The dominant one is the hijack story. So the hijack story is just uh, ethanol happens to trigger a reward network in our brain. We figure that out,
Hmm.
and so we pull the trigger as often as we can. So there's no reason there's a connection between alcohol consumption and the reward.
You
It's just
you
some trick.
kind of compare it to Twinkies and porn, which I think is funny.
No, actually,
Uh,
it's not like Twinkies. It's like porn.
oh, okay.
So masturbation or porn is a classic hijack, right? The orgasm is meant to be a reward for doing this really important evolutionary thing, which is getting copies of your genes into the next generation. But humans and other animals have figured out you can get it. You can get it lots of other ways, right?
Yeah.
Wildly non-reproductive ways. Um, but in that case, it's evolution, to personify evolution because it's easier to talk in intentional terms.
Hmm.
It lets us get away with it because it's not costly, and the reward thing works well enough that we're here to talk about it. Enough reproductive sex somehow still happens that
Mm.
the system works. Um, Twinkies are an example of a mismatch. It's a different type of evolutionary mistake because
I
in a
conflated the two. You're right.
mismatch,
Yeah.
yeah, in a mismatch, it was adaptive at some point. So in the hijack, it was never adaptive. It's always been a mistake.
Mm.
In the mismatch, it was adaptive in our evolutionary past, but it's not anymore. And so this taste we have for sugar and fat and all the things that are bad for us, um, that actually was an adaptive taste back in our evolutionary history because getting enough sugar and fat was always a problem.
Mm.
And so if you came across that kind of stuff, you should eat as much of it as possible. So for most of our history as a species, that connection made sense. And it's only recently where industrialized societies, we have Twinkies and all this junk food, and we have enough wealth that we can eat as much as we want, that it becomes a problem. Um, and so there have been mismatch theories about alcohol. So again, the dominant theory was just pure mistake,
Mm.
pure hijack. But there's this guy, Dudley at UC Berkeley, who had called it the drunken monkey hypothesis, that actually we developed this taste for alcohol because it was associated with fermented fruit. And ethanol is a pretty light molecule, so it travels long distances. You can smell it from far
If
away.
you've ever been to
So
a
he thought,
distillery or a brewery, yeah, for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
you know that,
Yeah.
you can smell it from miles away, right?
Mhm.
So his theory is that you could. He calls it at one point the dinner gong of the jungle. So we would be able to smell ethanol from a distance and track it down, and it tends to be associated with high calorie payoffs. So a piece of fermented fruit has got a lot of calories. It's a nice little package of calories for a primate. So he thinks we developed this taste for alcohol to adapt to eating fallen fruit on the jungle floor. and then it just becomes a problem. And again, in the modern world, when we have it gets fermented into these dangerous substances. So that's one theory. There's the dirty water hypothesis
Mm-hmm.
that we didn't understand the connection of don't have your latrine next to the stream that you're drinking out of, and so water often was contaminated. If you take contaminated water and you ferment it into beer, it becomes potable.
Mm-hmm.
You can drink it. So that was a very prominent theory. The problem with that one, as I point out in the book, is that the other way to make water potable is just to boil it. And lots of people who boil water still drink alcohol, and it's a lot easier to boil it than go through like ferment making beer, which
Mm-hmm.
is actually a multi-step, very difficult process. Um, so I argue in the book these all may be playing some role.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible. Another theory, the micronutrient theory, is that when you take grain and ferment it into beer, the yeast adds some micronutrients to it.
Mm-hmm.
So you get some vitamin B and some other stuff from beer that you wouldn't get from the same grain made into bread. And so some people have argued this is how the people who were working on the pyramid survived, because they were eating basically just plain bread. They didn't have a lot of vegetables or fruit,
Mm-hmm.
but they were also drinking beer. So maybe they were getting some micronutrients from the beer. And I argue, these all could have played some role, but there's no way any one of them is a complete explanation, because there are other ways to get the same functions without the harm.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want micronutrients, you make a porridge or make a yogurt. You get the same functions without the hangover, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, so I think it's important to kind of carefully walk through and debunk all of these alternative explanations.
And if all these evolutionary explanations were true, as the modern world came around, as prohibition started to gain hold, we should have, we needed it up until this point, but now we have the clean water. Now we have, the
Yeah,
like we
yeah,
have the
we have
vegetables. We are
micronutrients.
we are good to
Yeah,
go. And, you know, famously and historically, prohibition was not a great success. It it did not go
yeah,
over
yeah,
well. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it doesn't explain. It also has trouble explaining the continued practice in the face of lots of resistance and an increasing awareness of the dangers of alcohol. We still turn to it, even though I could pop a vitamin B supplement.
Sure.
So yeah,
If that's what you were looking
yeah,
for. Yeah. Easier
yeah.
ways. So you describe us searching after three C's. You search we're basically we have a need to be creative, cultural, and communal. Do you mind talking about
Mm-hmm.
those a little bit, about how intoxicants fit into that mold?
So yeah, so humans, other animals seem to get pleasure from ethanol.
Hmm.
So birds will seek it out, primates will seek it out. Humans are the only species that dedicates a significant amount of time and effort to carefully producing alcohol and making sure it's available. And one of my arguments is we need it as a tool because we're a weird kind of species. So we're a primate, but our closest relatives are chimpanzees. They live in these small bands of mostly related people. They have they're mostly all related genetically. They have some outsiders maybe who are part of their group, but it's a pretty small group. If they meet strangers, they kill them.
Yeah.
They don't get along well with others.
Which nowadays is not too far from some groups on Twitter, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
we've
So
regressed a little,
there's remnants.
possibly, but
Well, but that's very much still a part of our
no,
psychology. I
yeah.
mean, we are chimpanzees at some level,
Hmm.
but we've been domesticated by evolution in various ways, and some of those are genetic. So we've changed our we look we kind of I call us the Labradors of the primate world, because we look a bit like domesticated dogs just biologically. We have neonatal features that make us look more like puppies than wolves. But some of them are cultural practices, and so I argue there's a bunch of cultural practices we use to kind of figure out the trick of how you get primates who are selfish, want to favor their relatives, want to be aggressive to outsiders. How do you get them to live in large scale societies?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look around at large scale societies, we're cooperating with strangers all the time. And usually strangers, often strangers we're never going to see again. We're incredibly friendly to outsiders. We're incredibly cooperative to people in the culture we live in who we've never met. How does that work? How did we make that transition from kind of small hunter-gatherer lifestyle where we're not that different from the way we lived as chimpanzee relatives, to living in New York or Cambridge, Massachusetts? Um, Religion's part of that answer. So we create these kind of fake communities through religion. We bond in various ways through ritual practices. But I argued that alcohol is one of these things that helps us become communal and cooperative.
Mm-hmm.
So we face these cooperation dilemmas where the only way to really succeed is to trust another person. So these are economists call these prisoner dilemmas, where you and I, we're going to get the best deal if we both cooperate, but I'm vulnerable to you defecting and kind of ratting me out. And so in prisoners dilemmas, the only rational strategy is for me to rat you out first
Mm-hmm.
before you rat me out. And then we both get kind of not very good payoffs. Humans actually solve prisoners dilemmas in real life all the time. We trust each other, even when we're vulnerable, trusting each other all the time. And one way we do that is alcohol. So, alcohol has these functions. It's the two main ones I focus on are the downregulation of the prefrontal cortex. That's the part of your brain that's in charge of cognitive control, suppressing things you don't want to do that are automatic, staying focused on task, being goal, thinking about future rewards outweighing present rewards. And it's a really important part of being a functioning adult is to have a PFC, but it also can, it's the thing that makes you defect in the prisoner's dilemma.
Mm-hmm.
If you're being
Yeah.
completely rational, you're going to defect. If you can turn that down a little bit, um, you become a little less rational. You also are less able to lie. So I'm less able to trick you into thinking that I'm trustworthy when I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm also getting these chemicals flooding my brain that make me less inclined to want to cheat you. Suddenly, I really like you and I feel good about you. I feel good about myself. We get these endorphins and serotonin boosts from consuming ethanol. Um, so the communal and cultural part, you think about when people get together and have to make an agreement or just learn to get to know each other, learn to trust each other, the alcohol comes out. And that's because people, consciously or not, are aware that it helps overcome barriers and gets people to bond.
Mm-hmm.
And I talk about some good experimental evidence that this is the case. And then the creative part. The other weird thing about us as a species is that we're completely dependent on technology. So humans could not survive without technology.
Mm-hmm.
We biologically adapted, so our jaws and our teeth, and even our digestive system has adapted to eating cooked food.
We need fire.
So we
Yeah.
couldn't live. We need fire, and fire's a technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not a baby isn't born knowing how to make a fire. So we've actually biologically adapted to technology, and it's not just fire. We're completely dependent on tools for catching prey and for farming and doing all the things we do.
Mm-hmm.
And that means we're dependent on innovation because the environment's changing, probably more relevant. Other groups are getting better technologies and we're competing with them for the same resources. And so there's a pressure on humans to be creative in a way there isn't with regard to any other species. Lions aren't like brainstorming. What's a better way to catch a gazelle? Just they
Yeah.
just do it the same way their ancestors did it. And so the problem there again is the PFC. So the prefrontal cortex is very good at A to B to C logical reasoning, there's good experimental evidence that it gets in the way of creative insights. So connecting A to Z, the brain, the pre-FC gets in the way of us doing that.
Mhm.
Um, and this is why kids are really creative. So I talk about this child development work showing that kids are super creative, and we get less creative as we age. And I lay on top of this our declining ability to solve these creativity tasks
Mhm.
matches exactly the maturation of the prefrontal cortex. So by the time we're in our mid 20s, the PFC is fully developed, and we suck at these kind of creative insight tasks. Um, but the problem with kids is that they're
They
not
can't put their shoes on. Yeah.
they can't put their shoes on. They invent stupid stuff that isn't useful. Um, so the ideal solution to that problem would be make your mind childlike temporarily,
Mhm.
for a couple hours, come up with some great ideas, and then be an adult again, so you can actually put those ideas into practice. And I argue that's basically what alcohol is doing. It's down regulating the PFC. It's making us temporarily more creative again, the way we were when we were kids. But then we're still adults, and we actually know what a good idea is and what's a bad idea. We know actually what the problem is that we want to solve. And so and this is why alcohol, I argue, has been associated with poets and artists and creative people in every culture I know of around the world.
Mhm.
um, because it makes perfect sense. There's a huge experimental literature on PFC and creativity. The connection is very clear. PFC is bad for creativity. There's only one study that directly is using alcohol to enhance creativity, but it showed that if you get people to 0.08 BAC, so about 2 beers in, they do better on creativity tasks
Mhm.
than people who are sober. So there's some direct experimental evidence with
Yeah.
alcohol for
Which
this.
you have to presume is probably due to the difficulty of getting approved to bring
Yeah,
subjects
no, it's
in. Oh
totally
yeah.
it's 100 it's 100%
Yeah.
due to that. I've tried to do yeah, I tried to do a wine tasting study way back in the day, on a different, more about taste, kind of how taste works. And we gave up after like a year of trying to get IRB approval.
Mhm.
It's just really hard. So that's one of the reasons.
If you've been enjoying this so far, please take a moment, hit that like button, subscribe, share with a friend. It'd mean the world to me. All right, that's enough. Back to the talk. The whole thing that you just walked us down, and so that is the central. Like, I love the way you framed the ideas Apollo versus Dionysus. I feel like that is the core of it. Uh, an
Mm-hmm.
ancient Greek idea. We have Apollo, the god of rationality and purpose, and the prefrontal cortex, you could say, kind of guiding
Mm-hmm.
everything, versus Dionysus, that wild connecting creative force that also has a dark side. And but
Yeah.
it's there. Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
it was Nietzsche too that said that it had that famous connection too, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. He revived. He thought the Greeks were very wise in kind of seeing this dichotomy between Apollo and Dionysus.
Hmm.
Um, and he thought that his society was not celebrating Dionysus enough. So he was trying to revive. One way to look at Nietzschean philosophy is trying to revive Dionysianism.
Sure.
um, you know, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, you need both, and the Greeks were aware that you needed both. And they're also, they're a little scared of
Oh
Dionysus.
yeah.
He
No.
was,
Yeah.
they worshipped him, but he had a dark side.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Oedipus, the bacchanal, they rip apart someone, and like it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they
They
rip
they were
apart.
not
Yeah,
afraid to represent the negative sides of anything.
yeah,
uh,
yeah, yeah.
I think that's actually a good segue. Because I do appreciate that, even though you have a thesis and you really investigate and really flesh out the positive aspects of alcohol, that you don't shy away from what is undeniably some of the darker sides of intoxicants.
Yeah.
There is an addictive nature to a lot of mind altering substances that
Hmm.
just does exist in part and parcel. And you know
Yeah.
going back to the evolutionary mismatch, we do have distillation now, and that is a
Mm.
step change in
That's a
intoxication.
complete,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a complete game changer. So yeah, that's one of my arguments. So I talk about there's always been these dark sides to alcohol.
Mhm.
Every culture I know of that uses it is also worried about these problems. So um, no culture doesn't use alcohol. No culture doesn't flirt with prohibition, at least occasionally, right? Because they're aware that it's a dangerous thing.
Mhm.
Um, but two things have happened really recently, especially in the story. If I'm telling a story that starts 10 million years ago with these primate ancestors, this is yesterday. Um, Distillation and isolation.
Yeah.
So distillation, alcohols always come with this built-in safety feature,
Mhm.
which is that natural fermentation can only get you up to whatever. I mean, historically, we probably were drinking 2 or 3% ABV beers
Oh yeah.
and maybe slightly stronger fruit wines.
Maybe
We've
mead
been
every once in a
pushing,
while, but you have to find the honey
yeah, me.
first. Yeah.
You have to find the honey, and even that can't get very high.
Mhm.
So there's a limit because the yeast are producing alcohol, ethanol, as a biological warfare weapon against bacteria. So they both want this piece of fruit, and the yeast get in there and start making alcohol, turning the sugar into alcohol to kill the bacteria because they can take it and the bacteria can't.
Mhm.
But they can only take it up to a point. And so once you get up to about, whatever yeast, we've developed these yeasts that are super hardy because we want more and more alcohol. So we've pushed them up to about 16% ABV. That's kind of the record of what a
Yeah.
yeast can
Like
survive
Australian
at.
Shiraz or some like Napa Cabs,
Yeah,
essentially. Yeah.
yes, super hot climate red wine can get
Mhm.
that high. Um, but that's it. You can't get higher than that. And that's what we've been stuck with it. But it's a safety feature. It means that beers and wines aren't going to be too dangerously alcoholic. But with distillation, we completely disable that safety feature, and we pull the alcohol out and concentrate it, and then you can get 90 something percent ABV gins and vodkas, and I argue in the book that's just a completely different drug.
Mhm.
Even though it's still ethanol, it's in such a powerful form that when it hits our brain body system, all the natural defenses we have just are completely overwhelmed. And so distilled liquors are scary and really dangerous. And then isolation. So historically, we've always having private access to alcohol is unheard of
Mhm.
historically. You always drank alcohol in a public setting, usually very carefully, ritually controlled. And if you look at these rituals, they're unconsciously, consciously designed to limit your alcohol consumption. You can only drink when the cup comes
Mhm.
around, and it's the symposiarch, the host of the wine party, is watering it down or making it stronger or waiting if people are too drunk. You can only drink when someone makes a toast. There's all these mechanisms
Mhm.
for regulating. Even informally, we do this. When we go to a pub and we order rounds of drinks, if I have alcohol abuse tendencies and I down my beer really fast and I want another one, I've got to wait until everyone else is done,
So,
right?
Edward, you want
And
another beer, huh?
yeah,
Yeah.
it'd be weird for me to be like,
Yes.
"Hey, excuse me, can I get an interim one?" People would look at me, and I'd know that people would look at me,
Yeah.
and so it would help restrain me.
Mhm.
So when we're drinking in public, even if we don't have traditional kind of really formal religious rituals around it, we have informal rituals that help us control our drinking. And what's new is the fact that you can be alone in your house and have the local liquor store deliver a case of tequila
Yes.
to your door.
On a Tuesday.
And you could just, on a Tuesday,
Yeah.
you could just sit in front of a TV and drink as much as you want.
Mhm.
And that, we're not designed to deal with
No.
that. So the combination of these two things has made alcohol much more dangerous. And again, this is a recent development. So this ability to have private access to unlimited quantities of alcohol is new. So it's always been dangerous, but it's gotten more so recently. which means we have to be even. One of my arguments is we need to kind of reintroduce these safety features.
Sure.
So try to avoid distilled liquor,
Mm-hmm.
and try not, don't drink alone. Just try to drink and use. And so I hold up as a model the kind of Southern European drinking culture,
Mm-hmm.
where Italy, Spain, most of France, you mostly drink wine and beer. You always drink it with a meal. It's always a mixed group, parents, kids, everyone's around the table. Um, Getting drunk, drinking to the point of getting visibly drunk is shameful.
Mm-hmm.
You'd be embarrassed to slur your words or seem drunk. And when the meal is over, the drinking is over. Like, you don't drink away from the meal table.
Mm-hmm.
And these are mostly informal rules. No one kind of lays them out. But if you violate them, you find out very quickly that you violated them,
Sure.
as I
Yeah.
discovered with my Italian relatives. When my ex-wife's Italian, we'd spent a lot of time there. And so these help you. And there's good data that, so, Italy per capita alcohol consumption is really high. They drink a lot of alcohol.
Mm.
Their alcoholism rates are really low. But you take an Italian and you move them to New Jersey,
Put them in the
and the next
suburbs.
generation,
Yeah.
same genes, they start drinking like Americans, which is the northern drinking culture. Drink to get drunk, big groups of dudes or women on their own. Getting drunk is the point. You're kind of expected to get dangerously drunk and
Mm-hmm.
throw up, or and that leads to really high alcoholism rates and binge drinking.
Yeah.
And so we can embrace cultures that help us drink safely as opposed to ones that don't.
Mm-hmm. No, and I think that your kind of blanket, I don't know if I'd say condemnation, but just cautionary note about distilled liquor is very on point. Because I like to think, equivalents, a shot of whiskey, say, in a glass of wine, roughly the same amount of alcohol. And, if you say that's a 5 ounce
Yeah,
glass of wine, got five of those in a bottle, I can, in a like course of a minute, quickly do 5 shots. I wouldn't be happy about it, but I could.
yeah,
It
yeah,
would be hard to sit and drink a whole bottle. Like that
yeah,
is an hour's task talking to someone over a meal. And like,
yeah.
you have that natural rate limiter. You can't drink wine that quickly. Beer even
No,
slower, and it's
no.
a lower alcohol level. Yeah.
Beer even slower. So if you're drinking a 2-3% ABV beer,
Hmm.
it's physically almost impossible to get dangerously drunk,
Hmm.
right? Just because it takes so long, just the volume you'd have to drink to get that amount of alcohol.
Yeah.
And so it makes it much safer. And that's why, we read about these people building the pyramids were drinking beer all the time. We're like, wow, they must have been falling down drunk, but they didn't have, 9% ABV triple IPAs.
Hmm.
They were drinking, lagers. They were drinking 2%,
Light loggers,
session
essentially.
ales,
Yeah.
really light
Yeah.
lagers. Yeah.
What they had in
Yeah.
Oklahoma before they changed the low brew laws.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. But those low brew laws, they were annoying to kind of craft beer people, but they're not crazy
No, yeah.
laws, right? They make sense.
They do. They do. I'm also thinking, so it's something that I've heard, and I don't have the attribution. I didn't know if it would come up today, but I've heard that one of the biggest changes they've seen introducing kiosks for ordering at fast food restaurants has been that the cultural sort of expectation is when you come to order and you're face to face with a human, one person, you usually get one hamburger. And one of the biggest
Right.
changes they've seen when you don't have to face the social stigma ordering from a
Yeah.
human is a lot of our larger like citizens are ordering two or more hamburgers.
Yeah.
And so there
Yeah.
is this unspoken power when you're dealing with human beings watching what you do, that
Yeah.
this is a way we do things and you do it even if you couldn't consciously point to that. When you remove the
Yeah. That's
human,
great.
there it is,
That's a great example. Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good example. I think that's why I've noticed. I mean, this is more relevant to alcohol, but it's the same phenomenon. I'm Canadian,
Mhm.
half Canadian. Fly Air Canada a lot, and Air Canada lounges vary now. So they used to all be self-serve alcohol. So there's just like an open bar, and you go get whatever you wanted, liquor bottles out. Um, and I think partly because of excessive drinking, they switched. Some of the lounges have switched to models where you have to go. The alcohol is still free, but you have to go ask someone for it. There's a
Mm,
bartender
the
who pours it for
slightest
you.
friction. Yes.
Yeah, the slightest, and it's not just even the friction; it's the social.
Mhm.
It's really the social thing, right? Even if it was, I had to go to a kiosk and plug it into a machine and they
Mhm.
had to give it to me. It wouldn't be the same as asking a person
Yeah.
and downing that glass of wine and going back like 5 minutes later and asking for another one. They're going to be like, okay,
Yeah.
you're not going to do it because you're going to feel embarrassed. So it is this social drinking. That's why social drinking is so much safer.
Yeah. Airports are a
Yeah.
funny microcosm of that because even with the people around, so I haven't flown extensively, but the few times I have, I will always see people, even in the mornings, at the bars having brews. And I wonder how
Yeah.
much of that is that knowledge. I'm sure there's a non-trivial number of people that hate flying and using it for
Yeah.
its medicinal effects, but how many
Right.
people are taking advantage of being in a scenario where there might be people there, but the cultural norms are
They're
out
anonymous.
and they'll never see them
Yeah.
again? Yeah.
You'll never see them again. You're in an anonymous space.
Hmm.
You're taking advantage of the ambiguity about time zone. So yeah, it's 10 a.m. here, but maybe it's evening from where I came from. So you have a freedom to, and I think people kind of, it's like a vacation from social norms
Hmm.
being in an airport.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
I had to take my shoes off.
So
I deserve an IPA. It's it,
yeah, right, exactly. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
One of the
yeah,
reasons I was glad to talk to you in the morning is I probably would have had a beer if we'd done later. I was when you
yeah, yeah, yeah,
suggested the AM, I was like, that's probably good for the rest of my day's productivity. Uh,
yeah, yeah.
I did want to, I wrote this down. And I wanted to circle back because I thought it was a great example of, that dichotomy of trying and not trying in the real world. So I have a cat. Uh, our cat's name is Tugboat. But anyways, he got a little infection on his paw, and so we have to give him pills, so steroids and antibiotics the last couple of days. He's a little
Hmm.
fighter, so we have to wrap him up just to do it.
Yeah, right.
And any day at any time, if I had that door open behind me, he would be here in my lap. He is obsessed with coming up to me and rubbing on my leg, and like I cannot get rid of this cat. And today, knowing that I had to catch him, I could not find him. I'm like digging apart the house. Like there is
Yeah,
this thing in nature where if you are trying to do a thing, the thing that would normally happen all of a sudden is beyond your reach. Like like
yeah,
that
yeah.
Apollo prefrontal cortex, I have to catch this cat. Impossible. I hunted
Yeah.
him for like 30 minutes. If and then I
Well,
was about
and
to
you're probably kicking, and you're kicking off a different, because you're going after him consciously. You're kicking off an energy that he can
yeah.
sense, and he's like, I'm out of here."
About the time I
Right?
started giving up and thinking, I don't know if I'm going to get him, he just popped out and was like,
Yeah, yeah,
hello,
yeah,
hello, little tugboat. Welcome to the party.
yeah. It's the same. It's the same as dating, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to get a date, and you can't get a date because you're just kicking off this trying too hard energy that people don't like. So yeah, trying not to try was about why there's a connection between charisma and spontaneity, essentially. Why in social situations you tend to do better when you're not trying.
Hmm.
And it has to do with this trust issue. We really like it when people seem like they're relaxed and not trying too hard.
Sure, sure. Before we get too close to in, there was one other thing. I think one of my favorite things that I've read in forever, and it was about Beowulf. Uh, well,
Oh
oh
yeah.
yeah. I want to get the exact words here though. Oh man, I'm trying to see where did I put that quote. I'm sorry, I'm derailing us. But oh yes, the highest praise accorded to the legendary Viking Anglo-Saxon hero Beowulf was that he never killed his friends when he was drunk.
Yes, which apparently was rare for Viking. It's rare enough to mention.
Yes,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
is
yeah,
his claim to fame. So
yeah.
yeah.
No, I use that example. I mean, so the Vikings come up in the book because you know they were the origins of kind of Northern European drinking culture. This kind of drinking to get drunk,
Mhm.
um, really binge drinking to the point that they not infrequently killed their friends while they were drunk. I talk about this account from an Islamic envoy who was sent to visit this Viking group in present day Eastern Europe, and was just horrified by just the way they get fallen down drunk. Um, and yet they were a pretty successful group, right? They actually,
Yeah.
conquered big swaths of Northern Europe. Some significant, non-trivial proportion of Europeans today are descended from Vikings. So as a cultural group, they did all right.
Yeah. They had a
Um,
rip roaring fun time
and
doing it too. So.
yeah, yeah. So clearly, they were getting something functional out of
Mhm.
alcohol, despite these obvious dangers.
Yeah. And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that since you brought up Islamic people. So, Islamic people, the rise of Mormonism, there's
Hmm.
this huge movement with the younger people that I'm even seeing in my restaurant of low to no alcohol consumption. So there
Yeah.
is a rising tide against at least this form of intoxicant. I don't know if it's
Hmm.
paralleling the increase in marijuana legalization.
Cannabis.
Oh,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
And I'm sure that's
yeah.
a huge
I think
swath of
that's
it.
got to be part of it's got to be part of it.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I get asked about this a lot.
Yeah.
What's going on with whatever this new generation is called? Are they Z now?
I don't know.
Um,
I'm
whatever.
I'm
Young
I'm
kids,
firmly in the
people,
millennial, and I'm happy with it. I know what
yeah.
I'm called. Yeah.
So people in their 20s
Mhm.
are drinking less
Yeah.
than my generation did, than your generation did. Um, and I get asked about this a lot. I think part of it is the availability of alternate intoxicants.
Hmm.
So a lot of the people who would be drinking are doing cannabis instead. Um, and cannabis has a lot of advantages as a drug. So it's not physically addictive.
Hmm.
It is physiologically less harmful to you than alcohol is. So it's got some advantages. The reason it lost, so we've had cannabis for a really long time too,
Herodotus mentioned it.
but
Yeah.
yeah, it's been around forever. But it lost the cultural evolutionary battle between intoxicants. Alcohol won,
Hmm.
cannabis lost. Um, and that's because cannabis has got some fatal problems as a commonly used social drug. One of them is that it's really hard to dose. So, if you ever try, like if you're smoking it, you have to know how to hold the smoke in your lungs. And different people doing that different degrees.
Don't worry, I
If
remember
you eat
college.
it,
Yes. No.
yes, yeah, and then eating it,
Yeah.
if you remember college, the delay between when you eat it and when it comes on is so long.
Mhm.
It's really hard to dose, and a lot of people overdose
Mhm.
because they're like, oh, nothing's happening, and then crucially, it affects different people really differently.
Mhm.
And so I've tried, especially living in Canada where it's been legal for a while, and you can get any type of specialty subtype of cannabis. People have always been, oh, try this strain.
Mhm.
It all has exactly the same effect on me, where it makes me feel really stupid and paranoid, and then I fall asleep.
Stupid, paranoid,
So
slow, maybe a little anxious.
slow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
anxious. It makes me a little anxious, and then I fall asleep.
Mhm.
And so it's a terrible social drug. Whereas I had friends in college who, would want to talk about philosophy or go out dancing. It made them
Mhm.
really social. And this is well documented that cannabis just has really different effects on different people,
Yeah.
whereas alcohol is very consistent cross individual. So I don't know why. So maybe it's a novelty thing. cannabis is available now. It's kind of cooler to do cannabis. Um, it's a reaction against, our parents' drugs.
Hmm.
We don't want to be like our parents. But I think part of it is also that we have new data on the physiological harms of alcohol that wasn't available 10, 15 years ago.
Sure.
And I've talked to actually recently, you sometimes learn really cool things being on shows with other people. So there's a guy who's at Harvard who thinks that the claim that alcohol's impact on the body is net negative. He thinks that's wrong. If you really look at the data, that's not at all clear. And it's being driven by this kind of neo prohibitionism. But in any case, the messaging that young people are getting is that, forget about the cholesterol benefits, forget about the French paradox and 2 glasses a day. Any alcohol consumption is bad for you.
Hmm.
And so it's partly the public health messaging that they're getting to, I think, that they're paying attention to more, I think, because their habits aren't as fixed,
Yeah.
right? So I read that, I'm like, whatever, I'm going to still have my wine with dinner. I'm not going to change that. But I'm old and I'm kind
Hmm.
of fixed in my ways. So I think partly they're responding to this public health
Sure.
messaging.
And forgive me because I am steeped in the alcohol world. I run a restaurant and I've got my SOM
Yeah.
certification. Is I can't remember if this was you or someone else, but there's an argument too that there is no level of driving that is safe. I think this is you,
Yeah.
where
That's the argument. Yeah.
yeah, where it's like, yes, technically, if you drive, you run the risk of dying the same as booze, but the government has never articulated like, therefore, the citizen shouldn't drive. It's
Yeah.
yeah, there's a clear up
No, this,
benefit that you point out that driving is a good intrinsically that you can see, whereas alcohol needs a defender
yeah.
like you.
We need to talk about the
Yeah,
functions because
yeah.
the way we talk about it from a public health perspective is completely myopic.
Mhm.
And it's just through this, it's purely through risk reduction and physiological effect language, which, as I say, from a physiological perspective, you shouldn't drive a car. You probably should try not to leave the house too often because it's dangerous. So you get hit by a car crossing the street. But we don't wrap ourselves in bubble wrap and stay in our houses
Mhm.
because we're not monomaniacally focused on reducing risk in other areas of our life.
Yes.
I kayak,
Hmm.
even though that's probably dangerous at some level.
Hmm.
It's only with regard to alcohol that suddenly everyone's obsessed with gaining another, 2 weeks of potential lifespan.
Yeah.
And, it's a weird way to think. If you told me for sure, I would live 2 months longer if I never touched alcohol again, um, like, okay, fine, I'll live 2 months shorter. I
Yeah.
want to enjoy, life without, beautiful, cool climate Chardonnay with some
Mhm.
fish. I mean,
Yeah.
that
And
that would be sad.
it's like all those experiments where they calorically restrict, the level and it extends the
Yeah,
lifespan, but
yeah,
it's like it's
yeah. But that
true, but
sucks.
yeah, like everyone hates it. Yeah.
Everyone
Yeah.
hates it. It's like, yeah, no, it's true. It's very similar to this, these mice studies where it's like, look, if you starve the mouse,
Hmm.
it will live longer.
Sure.
But it's like, wow, that sucks.
Yeah.
I don't want
That
anyone doing
first
that
part
to
of the
me.
sentence is what I'm focusing on. um,
Yeah,
I do
yeah,
wonder too. There is in my head a sense that it that drive and this current reality we find ourselves, that isolation. I wonder if marijuana is just uniquely suited to excel in environments where there's
yeah,
isolation, where there's a non-trivial number of people on weed that will just want to be alone. Where most people
yeah,
on alcohol want to go find people and party unless they're trying to hide their alcohol consumption. Like it's
yeah,
like,
yeah,
those drugs seem
yeah.
to be mismatched to our current reality, which might explain the rise of marijuana consumption.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, no, so because I do think the kind of paranoid thing is quite common.
Hmm.
And the only time I've ever enjoyed alcohol, or sorry, cannabis, is if I occasionally like being home alone watching a stupid movie, it can be
Sure.
pleasurable. Where it doesn't matter that I feel stupid because there's no one else around.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. It's in that case, it's really an isolating drug. It's a drug that keeps you alone in your house in front of the TV rather than out at a pub talking to other people.
Which is
So
perfect for today.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, that's where I think, restaurants are really important and
Mhm.
bars are important. Um, I don't think public health officials, so alcohol harms your lifespan probably.
Mhm.
It's data's unclear, but let's just accept that it's a net negative. The other thing that's really dangerous for your health, super dangerous for your health, is loneliness.
Sure. Yeah.
There's really good data on this, and so that's also not talked about. That this was an issue in COVID, right, where public health officials had to decide, well, can we still have bars and restaurants? And most of them said no,
Mhm.
because we want to reduce mortality from COVID. But especially once we had vaccines, I think that was actually just a medically incorrect decision because the harm inflicted on people by loneliness and isolation probably far outweighed the dangers from COVID once we got to a certain level of protection from
Yeah.
vaccines.
Some people,
And
it took
so,
years for them to come. I'm
yeah,
sure there's some people that still don't feel comfortable. Yeah.
yeah, no, there's still people who wear masks in
So,
public and don't feel comfortable
yeah.
going. If a restaurant gets too crowded, they'll leave. Um, the effect on kids was awful
Mm.
because kids especially need that social contact. So I think that this is where I think the service industry doesn't do a good enough job of pointing out that you're not just delivering food and alcohol and providing this kind of short shot pleasure to
Mhm.
people. You're providing a venue where people actually can socialize and be around other people, and we desperately need that, especially in places where um, especially in suburbs, so especially in places where people aren't mixing.
Mhm.
If you live in a city and you're seeing people at the market, and that's different, but in when people live isolated by themselves in suburbs, they need a place to hang out and see other people.
Sure. All right. Edward Slingerland, everyone. Trying Not to Try and Drunk. Everyone go get those books. They're awesome. Anyone listening today, where should they follow you? Where should they find out more about what you do?
I have a website, so just edwardslingerland.com, and you can find out. I have those two trade books, and I'm going to be working on a new one at some point.
Oh,
But
exciting.
everything, all my interviews, newspaper articles, is all on that site.
Awesome. Well, hey, from an industry where I focus on just explaining to people what the booze is and why they should drink it with what they
Yeah,
eat, it was super cool to
yeah,
explain, behind the scenes of why does it exist in the first place. So it was awesome getting to talk to you. So thank you for taking the
yeah.
time.
Anytime.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot.
All right, that's the end of the show. Thank you for listening to Serves You Right. My name is Andrew. If you have not, please hit like, subscribe, send to a friend. The more listeners we get, the more subscribers, the more cool guests we can get, and the more cool things we can do. All right, that's it. Episodes of this podcast come out every Tuesday and Thursday, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.